When we read the Bible today, we read it as a book full of stories. But realistically, as a book, it has a story. And that story is one of generations of scribes and communities and myriads of manuscripts. But arguably, without one of those major manuscripts, we might not even have this. So I want to look at the Leningrad Codex today and see why it matters for how we understand the textual, cultural, and even artistic history of modern Bibles. If you pick up any modern version of the Hebrew Scriptures, say a translation of the Old Testament or a translation of the Hebrew Bible, what you're reading, about 98% of it, comes from the Leningrad Codex. So what makes this manuscript so foundational and so impacting for modern scriptures? The Leningrad Codex is significant for at least 3 reasons. The first has to do with the actual text of the Bible, the words on the page. These come from that Masoretic tradition, and the Masoretes were a group of scribes that between the 5th and 7th centuries CE started collecting and copying manuscripts. But if we know anything about ancient or medieval scribes, it's not that they were just photocopiers replicating texts. Their job was to understand and interpret the texts as they copied. The Masoretes did one really innovative thing that made all the difference for us as we try to study the Hebrew Bible. Hebrew is originally a consonantal language. There are no vowels, but the Masoretes understood that as time wore on, perhaps the early meanings and understandings of that consonantal text could be lost or confused or misunderstood by later readers or audiences. So they developed a vocalization system. So when you look at a modern Bible, if you take a Hebrew class, and you should take a Hebrew class, what you find is what looks like dots and dashes, like Morse code or something like this, all around the consonants of the text. That is the Masoretic vowel pointing system. And it's the backbone for how we understand classical Hebrew, and for many of us, our inroad into understanding and translating the Hebrew Bible. Now, they did this to clarify and interpret the text. Because if you imagine in English, we took out the vowels, we can still make sense of words and sentences, but at points we might be confused of what the word is supposed to mean. So imagine you take the English characters D and G and we mash them together. We take out the vowels. Now, that combination could be any number of words. It could be dig, it could be someone's pet dog, it could even be some dude named Doug, depending on what vowels you put in between them. So the Masoretes overlaid the consonantal structure of the Hebrew Scriptures with their vowel system. That was as much about preserving the text as it was about retaining and applying their interpretation of the text. Now, the second item that makes the Leningrad Codex so interesting also has to do with interpretation. Only this time it's not interpretation within the text, but the interpretations built around the text. The Masoretes were very close and careful readers of Scripture. We know this because all of these notations we see down the margins, in the columns, at the foot of the page, all of those unpointed, unvocalized sentences and sections are really their observations on things within the text. They measured things like vowels. They made comments on if they thought a reading within the text should be read a different way or inscribed a different way. They measured syllables, even center words of the entire scriptures. This is an amazing thing to see happen at this point because keep in mind, this is all analog. These are really proto-databases, and the only way the Masoretes could track that type of information is by reading and measuring and weighing every single sentence, every single word of the text. So when we think of the Masoretic text tradition or the Leningrad Codex, we might think the words on the page are all we're concerned with, but if you actually open up the Codex, you're connecting yourself with an entire world of interpretive tradition and a deeply invested scribal community that's looking at Scripture from the inside out and understanding how they can develop their interpretations around the text. Now, the third significant thing about the Leningrad Codex is at once beautiful but easily overlooked. It has nothing to do with the words on the page, nothing to do with interpretation around them, but everything to do with how the Leningrad Codex is also a piece of art and cultural history. If you flip to the end of the Codex and you get to the end of Nehemiah, and then you pass through a few more pages of Masoretic lists and notes, what you find is a number of pages that are ornately decorated. They're brilliantly designed, They have shapes, color, Stars of David, hearts interspersed with commentary, with Hebrew writing. And all of this comes together to decorate the closing section of the Codex. Why? Because every single manuscript we have is unique. Whether it's in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Septuagint, the Samaritan Pentateuch, or the Masoretic tradition, no two are alike. And in this case, what we find is, in a way, the Hebrew Bible is about more than the words on the page. The Leningrad Codex is just one of the many manuscripts that goes into the making of a modern Bible, but arguably it's the most important because it's the most complete. Yet when we read a modern Bible in translation or a Hebrew critical edition, what we're getting is largely words on a page. Yet as we've seen here, the Leningrad Codex and any other codex or manuscript, they all have characteristics of their own that make them unique, that make them significant, and that give them a really unique place in the modern and ongoing history of Hebrew scriptures. Well, thanks for joining me on this episode of Inscribed on the Leningrad Codex. If the world of ancient scribes, modern Bibles, medieval codices is exciting for you, then definitely subscribe to the channel and you'll get notifications about future content. If you liked the video, give me a like. If you have a question, let me know in the comments section below. Otherwise, thanks for being here. We'll see you next time on Inscribed. Now the Leningrad. Oh man, I've said it like 1,000 times here. Oh yes, okay.